Ayla sat in the back corner of the classroom, the same place where she always tried to hide, because it was easier to blend into the shadows than to face the noisy world around her. She was a small girl with soft eyes and quiet steps, the kind of child who never interrupted anyone and never caused trouble, but also the kind of child who was often ignored, forgotten, or talked over. The classroom felt louder today, full of excited students moving their chairs and talking about the music activity that was about to begin. Everyone seemed happy and confident, except Ayla. She kept her hands on her lap. Her fingers curled tightly as if she was afraid someone might look at them and ask her to prove something she didn't have. Music day was supposed to be fun, but for Ayla, it felt like a storm coming closer. Mrs. Corbin, the teacher, walked into the room with the same strict expression she always carried. Her heels clicked loudly against the floor, making the room fall silent. She liked order, she liked discipline, and she believed the best way to teach children was to push them until they broke or improved. Ayla never knew which one she was supposed to be. Every time Mrs. Corbin's eyes swept across the room, Ayla lowered her head, hoping she wouldn't be noticed. The piano stood in the corner of the class, shining under the ceiling lights. Most of the kids loved it. They would run their hands across the smooth keys, dreaming of the moment they would get their chance to play something impressive. But Ayla only looked at it from far away. She had never touched a real piano in her life. The closest she ever got to one was the old keyboard at the church her mother cleaned on weekends. Sometimes Ayla would press a few keys quietly when no one was around. The sound was tiny, soft, almost shy, just like her. But she loved it. It made her feel safe, as if those keys understood her silence better than people did. Mrs. Corbin clapped her hands and told the class that today each student would be asked to demonstrate something on the piano. It didn't matter if they were good or bad, everyone had to participate. The students groaned, some laughed nervously, some whispered about what they would play. Ayla felt her heart drop like a stone inside her chest. She wished she could disappear into the floor. She wished she could run home. But she sat frozen, afraid to even breathe. The teacher began calling names one by one. Some students hit random notes, some tried to play a song they memorized. Some made mistakes, and the class laughed. It was all fun for them, even the mistakes. But Ayla didn't see anything funny. She felt as if the air around her was getting tighter with every passing minute. When one boy finished his messy performance, he returned to his seat with a grin. The class clapped for him. Even though the tune made no sense, Ayla watched quietly, wishing she had the courage to smile too. But her mind was too full of fear. What if the teacher called her? What if everyone stared at her? What if she froze? Mrs. Corbin walked slowly around the classroom, her eyes scanning each student. She seemed unhappy, as if no one had reached her expectations. Then her gaze stopped on Ayla. The girl stiffened, her shoulders rising as if preparing for impact. Mrs. Corbin tilted her head slightly, a cold smile forming on her lips. She said Ayla's name in a firm, sharp tone, making the entire class turn toward her. Ayla felt the world tilt. Her chair suddenly felt too small, her legs too weak. She tried to say something. Maybe an excuse, maybe a whisper, but no sound came out. The teacher repeated her name louder, leaving no room for escape. The class watched with curious eyes. Some students whispered things like, "She's going to mess up," or "She can't even talk." "How will she play?" Their giggles made Ayla's chest tighten even more. She stood up slowly, her feet heavy as if they were made of stone. Each step toward the piano felt like walking through deep water, slow, heavy, and exhausting. When she reached the piano, she stood still, staring at the keys as if they were dangerous. Mrs. Corbin crossed her arms and announced to the class that Ayla would perform next. Her voice carried a tone of satisfaction, as if she expected something entertaining to happen. Something embarrassing. Ayla looked around, feeling every pair of eyes on her. Her heartbeat was loud, too loud, louder than the room itself. She touched the edge of the piano with trembling fingers. Her palms were sweaty, and she felt cold all over. She wanted to run, but she couldn't move. Her body refused to listen. Mrs. Corbin tapped her foot impatiently, telling Ayla to sit and play something, anything. Ayla slowly sat on the bench, her legs shaking so much she was afraid she might fall. She placed her fingers on the keys, but they didn't move. The teacher asked her again, louder this time, pushing her further into fear. The classroom felt colder, quieter, heavier. Ayla's throat tightened. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes. She wondered why she was always chosen, why she always felt like the smallest person in every room. She wanted to do something right, even just once. She wanted to prove she wasn't useless, and in that lonely classroom, under the sharp eyes of a teacher who expected her to fail, Ayla sat frozen, unaware that this moment, the moment meant to break her, would soon become the moment that revealed who she truly was. Ayla sat on the piano bench with her heart beating so loudly she felt the whole room could hear it. She did not want to lift her eyes. She did not want to see the classmates who were already waiting for her to fail. The silence in the classroom grew heavier, wrapping around her like a thick blanket she could not escape. Mrs. Corbin stood nearby with her arms folded, watching Ayla the way a strict judge watches a prisoner. There was no kindness in her eyes, only an expectation that this quiet little girl would give her something to laugh about later. A few students leaned forward in their seats, whispering to each other. Ayla caught small pieces of their words. Things like, "She's too scared," and "This will be funny." Someone in the back giggled, and the sound stabbed Ayla deeper than any insult. She had always been the quiet one, the girl who sat alone, the girl who never spoke unless forced, the perfect target for anyone who wanted to feel powerful. Mrs. Corbin tapped her foot on the floor, growing impatient. She raised her voice and told Ayla to begin. She said it with a sharpness that made the whole class straighten in their seats. Ayla's fingers hovered over the keys. Trembling, she wanted to move them. She wanted to try. But fear felt like a heavy chain around her wrists. "You're wasting everyone's time," the teacher said loudly enough for the entire class to hear. Her tone had a sting, like she wanted the other students to join in the humiliation. Ayla flinched, her shoulders rising. She could feel tears forming in the corners of her eyes. But she blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. Crying would only make everything worse. She knew that from experience. The teacher's voice hit her again, telling her she needed to stop being afraid, telling her she was holding the class back. Ayla felt each word like a weight pressing on her chest. A few students smirked. A few exchanged amused looks. Ayla felt smaller and smaller. As if she might disappear altogether, she tried to speak, tried to explain that she didn't know what to play. But when she opened her mouth, no sound came out, only a tiny breath escaped. Too soft for anyone to hear, Mrs. Corbin sighed dramatically and asked if Ayla really needed to be shown how to press a key. The class laughed at that, and the laughter felt like a wave crashing over Ayla, pushing her deeper into helplessness. Ayla looked at the shiny keys again. Her fingers inched forward, barely touching the cool surface. She remembered the little church keyboard, the only place she had ever dared to play. Those moments were private, safe, quiet. Nothing like this room full of watching eyes and cruel smiles. Mrs. Corbin stepped closer, towering over her. She said Ayla should hurry before she embarrassed herself even more. Ayla swallowed hard, her throat burning. She could not understand why the teacher disliked her so much, why she seemed eager to make her fail. Ayla had never caused trouble, never argued, never even raised her voice. Yet somehow, she was always the one pushed into situations she wasn't ready for. The pressure kept building, like a storm growing inside her chest. The teacher kept talking, the students kept whispering, and Ayla sat there caught in the middle of it. She felt trapped. like a small bird surrounded by too many hands, too many shadows. A boy in the front row muttered, "Come on. Just hit something," and a few students snickered again. Ayla could feel their impatience, their expectation of disaster. It was as if the whole class had already decided her fate. Ayla's hands shook harder. She wanted to disappear, to be anywhere except here. She wondered why the world always felt so loud. Why every room felt too big, and why she always felt too small. Her heartbeat throbbed painfully in her chest, and for a moment she thought she might faint. The teacher leaned closer and told her this was her chance to prove she wasn't as useless as everyone thought. The words sliced through Ayla, leaving her breathless. She didn't think anyone actually believed she had any talent. Not even her teacher, certainly not her classmates. Maybe not even herself. She took a shaky breath. Staring at the piano keys, they looked like little doors, each one holding a sound she was too afraid to open. But somewhere deep inside her, something tiny flickered, like a spark in the darkness. She remembered how the church keyboard had made her feel, how the notes had soothed her heart, how the sound had felt like a friend in a world where she had very few. She wanted to touch that feeling again, even if just for a second, even in this cruel room. Her fingers moved slowly, almost against her will, inching toward the keys. She wasn't sure what would come out, a sound, a mistake, maybe nothing at all. But she knew this moment would decide something about her. Something she didn't yet understand, and even though her fear was huge, something inside her whispered that she had to try. She had no idea the entire classroom was about to witness something none of them expected. Something that would turn this silent girl into someone unforgettable. Ayla sat frozen on the piano bench, her fingers still hovering above the keys. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for her to embarrass herself. Mrs. Corbin stood behind her with a look that mixed impatience and amusement, as if she was preparing to enjoy the moment when Ayla failed in front of everyone. The students leaned forward, some smiling, some whispering, some already convinced that this shy girl would not last even a few seconds before breaking down. The room was too bright, too quiet, too sharp. Ayla felt every heartbeat slam against her ribs, her stomach twisted painfully, and she wondered if she might get sick right there on the floor. But she stayed still, afraid that even moving would make someone laugh again. Mrs. Corbin let out a sigh loud enough for the whole class to hear. She said that if Ayla couldn't manage something so simple, then perhaps she didn't belong in the class at all. The words pierced Ayla like needles. Leaving her trembling even harder, the teacher stepped closer. Lowering her voice but raising its cruelty, she told Ayla she was wasting time, that she was proving exactly what everyone thought of her. Ayla's throat tightened, and for a moment, she could not breathe. The whispers from the students grew louder. A mix of mockery and boredom. Someone said, "Just get it over with," another muttered, "She's hopeless." Their words swirled around Ayla like a cloud of doubt, choking her confidence even more. But then something strange happened. A memory flickered in her mind, soft and gentle, like the sound of a distant lullaby. She remembered sitting alone in the church hall while her mother cleaned the aisles. She remembered pressing a few keys on the old keyboard, the tiny sparks of melody that came from them. For a moment, the memory wrapped around her like a warm blanket, giving her a breath of comfort she desperately needed. Still, the classroom felt hostile. The pressure was immense. The air felt thick as if it was pushing down on her shoulders. Mrs. Corbin stood tall behind her, arms crossed, waiting for the humiliation she believed was inevitable. She didn't see Ayla's fear, only the entertainment she expected to get out of it. She believed Ayla would freeze completely, cry, or run out of the room. And then she would lecture the class about preparation and responsibility. Ayla swallowed, her mouth dry. Her fingers rested lightly on the piano keys, cold and smooth under her trembling touch. She didn't know what she was going to do. She didn't know if she had the strength to play even a single note. But she knew she couldn't sit there forever. The longer she waited, the more powerful the whispers became. She took in a shaky breath, trying to gather whatever courage she had left. She wanted to prove something, not to the teacher, not even to the class, but to herself. She wanted to feel that little spark of warmth again, the comfort she had found in the church keyboard. So she decided she would touch one key, just one, even if it sounded wrong. Even if it caused more laughter, she would at least try. But just as she was about to press down, Mrs. Corbin's voice cut through the air again, this time louder and sharper. She said Ayla must hurry because the class had already wasted too much time on her. The room erupted in a few chuckles. Ayla's hands stiffened, and her courage slipped away like sand through her fingers. The teacher continued, saying that Ayla should show everyone what happens when someone refuses to practice. A few kids laughed openly now. Their laughter echoed in Ayla's ears, filling her with fresh waves of humiliation. She felt heat rise to her face, and she looked down, hiding behind her hair. She wanted the earth to swallow her. She wanted to escape, but her legs felt glued to the bench. She felt small, invisible, powerless. Then, from somewhere deep inside her, a voice rose quietly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't confident, but it was steady. It told her that she knew more than they thought. It told her that she had something inside her that none of them understood. It told her that she could push back, even if just a little. Her fingers started to move again, slowly, nervously. She let them rest on the white keys, and she breathed in deeply. The room fell into a deeper silence, watching, waiting, expecting her to crash and burn. But instead of pressing a key, Ayla pulled her hands back suddenly. Not because she was giving up, but because she was trying to steady her breathing. She closed her eyes, letting the voices fade into the background, letting her fear settle instead of explode. And in that tiny moment of calm, something changed in her. She opened her eyes again, calmer than before, and placed her fingers on the keys a second time. She didn't know what she would play. She didn't know how it would sound, but she knew she had to try. Little did the class know that what would follow would be nothing like they expected. Nothing like the teacher planned. Ayla was just a moment away from surprising everyone, including herself. Ayla kept her fingers resting on the piano keys. But something inside her had shifted. It was small at first, like a tiny spark that glowed quietly in a dark room, but it began to grow, warming her chest and calming her shaking hands. She could still hear the whispers of her classmates. She could still feel the pressure of their eyes. And she could still sense Mrs. Corbin waiting behind her for the humiliation she believed would come. But now, the memories of music from the old church keyboard were louder than the fear. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting herself drift back to those quiet evenings when her mother cleaned the church. The sound of her mother's footsteps echoing on the tiled floor. The soft light of candles on the altar, the lonely keyboard waiting in the corner. She remembered touching the keys with timid fingers, playing little sounds that felt like secrets she kept only for herself. There was no laughter then, no pressure, no judgment, only peace. When she opened her eyes again, the piano in front of her didn't look as frightening as before. It looked familiar, almost comforting, like a friend she hadn't seen in a long time. She took a slow breath, letting her hands relax. And then she pressed one key, just one. The sound was gentle and pure, ringing through the silent classroom like a drop of water falling into a still pond. The class grew quiet instantly. The small sound felt bigger than it should have, as if the room itself leaned in to listen. Ayla pressed another key, then another, her movements still slow but more certain than before. Her fingers began remembering the patterns she had once explored on the church keyboard, patterns she didn't even know she had memorized. A soft melody began to form, fragile but beautiful. It flowed like a small stream through the room, surprising everyone, including Ayla herself. The whispers stopped completely, replaced by stunned silence. Students stared with wide eyes, some leaning forward, unable to believe what they were hearing from the girl they thought had no voice at all. Ayla didn't look at them. She didn't look at Mrs. Corbin. She didn't look anywhere except at the piano keys moving beneath her fingers. The longer she played, the more confident she became. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing evened out, and the trembling in her hands faded like fog under sunlight. It was as if the music was coming from somewhere deeper inside her, somewhere she had locked away for a long time. Mrs. Corbin's arms slowly uncrossed as she watched, her confident smirk fading into uncertainty. She had expected failure, tears, or panic, but not this. Not a melody that sounded so heartfelt and natural. Not music that grew stronger with every passing second. The teacher's face tightened with surprise, and for the first time, she didn't know what to say. Ayla's melody began to fill the room completely. It grew richer, more emotional, as if every note carried a piece of her hidden heart. Her classmates stared at her with expressions that changed from amusement to disbelief, and then to something completely different, admiration. Even the students who had laughed earlier now sat frozen. Amazed and confused, Ayla could feel the music rising inside her. She moved from soft notes to stronger ones, letting her fingers dance across the keys in a way she had never done before. The room felt warm now, full of something powerful and impossible to ignore. She didn't understand how she was doing it. She didn't understand how she remembered melodies she never formally learned. But she didn't question it either. Her eyes glistened as she played. Not from fear, but from a deep emotion she didn't have words for. Music was the only language she truly felt safe using. And now it was speaking for her louder than any sentence she could ever say. Each note pushed away the shadows of shame. Each chord erased a little bit of the loneliness she had carried for so long. Mrs. Corbin slowly stepped back, her posture stiff. She had never imagined this shy girl had such talent buried inside her. And she wasn't sure how to react. The class wasn't looking at her anymore. They weren't seeking her approval or reacting to her words. All eyes were locked on Ayla, and that shook the teacher more than she expected. The melody reached a gentle high, then dipped into a soft wave, flowing with surprising grace. Ayla's fingers slid across the keys with a natural rhythm. As if she had been practicing for years in secret, she wasn't scared anymore. She didn't feel small. She felt alive, powerful, and connected to something deeper than fear. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the room remained silent for several seconds, a thick, breathless silence that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. The girl who had walked up trembling had played something pure, something beautiful, something unforgettable in that moment. Ayla realized something she had never felt before. She wasn't invisible. Not anymore. The fear, the shame, the laughter, none of it mattered now. Because her music had spoken louder than all of it. And she had surprised not only her classmates and her teacher, but also herself. The classroom stayed silent for a moment that felt long and heavy. Almost magical, Ayla sat frozen on the piano bench. Her fingers still tingling from the melody she had played. She could feel her heartbeat racing. But not with fear anymore. It was something different now. Something warm and bright, almost like pride. She didn't dare turn around. She didn't know what kind of expressions were waiting behind her. But the quiet told her something had changed. The first sound came from a chair creaking, then a faint whisper, someone saying, "How did she do that?" Another voice answered. "She was amazing." The whispers grew, soft but full of wonder instead of mockery. Students who had expected her to fail now stared in stunned disbelief. Their eyes were wide, their faces shocked, as if they had just witnessed something impossible. Ayla slowly looked over her shoulder. Her classmates were frozen, some with open mouths, some blinking rapidly as if trying to understand what had just happened. Even the ones who laughed at her a few minutes earlier now sat speechless. She had not only played well, she had silenced an entire classroom that loved noise. She had done something none of them expected, something none of them would forget. Mrs. Corbin stood completely still, her arms no longer crossed. Her eyebrows were raised, her confidence shaken. She had been ready to enjoy Ayla's humiliation, ready to lecture the class about failure. But instead she had been forced to watch a quiet girl reveal a talent that she had never noticed. It felt like the ground under her had shifted, and she didn't know how to stand firmly anymore. The teacher cleared her throat, trying to regain control. But her voice came out softer than usual. She started to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She had no idea what to say. She couldn't pretend she had expected this. She couldn't pretend she had helped Ayla in any way. She had done the opposite, and the entire class knew it. Ayla stood up slowly from the piano bench. Her legs still felt shaky, but it was not from fear now. It was from the overwhelming experience of pouring her heart into the music and realizing people had actually listened. She looked around the room, expecting to see judgment. But instead she saw something she never thought she would see: admiration. A girl from the second row raised her hand. Not to ask a question but to clap. Her hands came together softly at first, but then louder. The sound echoed through the room. And soon others joined in, first a few, then many, until the whole class was clapping for Ayla. The same kids who had whispered insults were now cheering for her. Ayla's eyes widened in disbelief. She had never been clapped for in her entire life. Not at home, not at school, nowhere. The sound wrapped around her like a warm coat, lifting her spirits in a way she had never experienced. She felt taller, stronger, seen. Mrs. Corbin watched her class clap with expressions she had never seen before. Joy, surprise, respect, all of it directed at Ayla. The teacher swallowed, realizing she could not pretend to be the one who inspired this moment. She had no part in Ayla's success, and for once, the students were not looking at her with fear or obedience. They were looking at Ayla with genuine admiration. The classroom slowly grew quiet again, but the energy in the room remained. An unspoken recognition that something special had happened. Ayla sat back in her chair, and some students glanced at her with smiles instead of smirks. They whispered things like, "She's really good," and "I didn't know she could do that," in the corner of the room. Near the open door, the school principal appeared. He had heard the music from down the hallway and walked in to see who was playing so beautifully. He looked from the piano to Ayla and then at the stunned class. His eyes settled on Mrs. Corbin. Waiting for an explanation, "What was that?" he asked gently. His tone was filled with genuine curiosity. Not anger, not judgment. Ayla lowered her head shyly. While the teacher stiffened, Mrs. Corbin forced a smile and said Ayla had just been demonstrating her musical skill for the class. But even as she spoke, her voice wavered. The principal raised an eyebrow, seeing right through her. He knew a natural moment when he saw one, and he knew genuine talent when he heard it. The principal stepped closer to Ayla and asked her if she knew how well she played. Ayla shook her head softly. She had no idea if it was good or bad. She only knew it felt right. She only knew the music had come from somewhere deep inside her. The principal nodded thoughtfully and said the school was preparing a performance showcase in a few weeks, and he wanted Ayla to be part of it. A wave of shock passed through the class again. The quiet girl no one noticed was now being invited to perform in front of the whole school. Ayla blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. No one had ever asked her to be part of anything important. The principal smiled warmly and said her talent shouldn't stay hidden anymore. Ayla felt something new inside her, hope. She had walked to the piano expecting humiliation, but instead, she discovered a piece of herself she never knew was so powerful. And without realizing it, she had turned a moment meant to break her into a moment that lifted her higher than she ever imagined. Ayla stood there stunned, the principal's words still echoing inside her mind. She could hardly believe he wanted her to perform in front of the whole school, the girl who used to hide in the back corner. The girl no one noticed, the girl they expected to fail, now had a chance to stand on a stage where everyone would see her. The idea felt too big for her small world. And yet something warm flickered inside her again. The same warmth she felt while playing the piano. But standing across from her, Mrs. Corbin did not share the warmth. Her face had gone stiff, pale around the edges, as if someone had pulled the ground out from under her feet. She had expected to embarrass Ayla, to use her as an example of failure. But now the quiet girl was being praised by the highest authority in the school. The teacher's lips tightened as she tried to hold her smile steady. But her eyes flickered with discomfort. The principal repeated his question, asking if Ayla would join the performance. His voice was gentle, encouraging, almost protective. Ayla's throat tightened as she nodded slowly, unsure if her voice would come out correctly. When she finally whispered, yes, it felt like the bravest word she had ever spoken. The principal's face brightened. He placed a supportive hand on Ayla's shoulder and told her he would personally arrange practice time on the school piano so she could prepare. The class watched silently, amazed, confused, maybe even inspired. Some students looked at Ayla with newfound respect, some with guilt for laughing earlier, and some simply with awe. But while the class was adjusting to this new reality, Mrs. Corbin was not. She stepped forward, clearing her throat. Trying to reclaim control of the moment, she said Ayla's performance was fine, but probably just a lucky attempt. Her voice was sharp, trying to cut through the admiration blooming in the room. The principal turned toward her with a puzzled expression. He asked, "Did you not know she could play like this?" Mrs. Corbin hesitated. Searching for an excuse, she said Ayla had never shown interest before, that she must have learned recently, that maybe she had practiced secretly at home. But the class knew the truth. They knew Ayla never had chances, never had attention, never had support. The teacher had simply never bothered to see her. The principal looked disappointed, not angry, but deeply confused as to how such talent had gone unnoticed. He reminded the teacher that it was her responsibility to nurture every student, not just the loud or confident ones. His tone was calm but firm, and it made the room feel colder for a moment. A few students exchanged glances, some whispered quietly, knowing the teacher's pride had taken a blow. But Ayla wasn't thinking about that. She was still trying to understand how her life had changed so quickly. She felt light, almost floating, as if the music she had played was still echoing inside her bones. She sat quietly at her desk, letting everything settle in her mind. Later that day, when the bell rang and students rushed out of the classroom, several kids stopped by Ayla's desk. They didn't tease her this time. They didn't whisper insults. Instead, they smiled genuinely. A boy who had laughed earlier said, "You were amazing." A girl told her, "I wish I could play like that." Ayla couldn't find the words. She only nodded shyly, but inside she felt her heart expanding. Mrs. Corbin watched this from her desk, her jaw tight. She had lost the control she once held so confidently. Students weren't seeking her approval anymore. They were looking at Ayla. The shift in the room was subtle but powerful. Ayla had changed something without meaning to. Simply by being herself. Simply by letting her hidden gift escape. After school, Ayla walked down the hallway toward the exit. The principal was waiting there. He told her he was proud of her courage. He said talent like hers needed support, not pressure or humiliation. He handed her a small card with the practice schedule for the performance showcase. Ayla held it gently, as if it was something precious, something fragile and full of promise. When she stepped outside, the sunlight felt different. Warmer, brighter, almost welcoming. She walked home with careful steps, replaying the melody in her mind over and over, wondering how something so painful had turned into something so beautiful. She didn't know much about confidence or bravery, but she knew one thing for certain: she wanted to play again. Behind her, inside the school, Mrs. Corbin sat alone in the empty classroom. Staring at the piano, her thoughts were heavy. Tangled in confusion and regret, she had tried to break Ayla. But instead she had discovered a truth she had never bothered to look for. And Ayla, walking home with the soft breeze brushing her cheeks, finally felt something she had never felt before: a quiet, growing belief that maybe she wasn't the weak, invisible girl the world thought she was. Maybe she had something special inside her after all. The next morning, Ayla walked into school with a different feeling in her chest. It wasn't confidence, not fully, but it wasn't fear either. It was something new, something gentle, like a small flame that refused to go out. She held the practice schedule tightly in her hand, reading the times again and again, making sure she hadn't imagined the whole thing. When she entered the classroom, the air felt different. Students who once ignored her or whispered about her now looked at her with curious eyes. Some even smiled shyly. Ayla kept her gaze lowered, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. But she could feel their stares, not sharp like before, but warm, soft, almost welcoming. As she sat down, a girl from the second row leaned over and whispered, "You played so beautifully yesterday." Ayla blinked, surprised. She didn't know what to say. So she just nodded and whispered, "Thank you." The girl smiled before turning back to her desk. Ayla's cheeks warmed, not with embarrassment, but with a shy sense of happiness. During the morning lessons, Ayla's mind drifted constantly toward the piano waiting down the hallway. She could almost feel the keys under her fingers. She could almost hear the quiet melody that had poured out of her yesterday. Her heart fluttered with anticipation. She wanted to play again, not for approval, not for praise, but because the music felt like a friend she had just rediscovered. When the bell rang for break, Ayla quietly made her way to the music room where the principal had told her to meet him. Her footsteps were small but steady. She pushed the door open slowly and found the room empty. Sunlight spilling across the piano like a golden spotlight. It looked even more beautiful today, almost inviting. A moment later, the principal walked in with a warm smile. He asked Ayla if she was ready to start practicing. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. He encouraged her gently, telling her she didn't need to rush, that she could play whatever she felt comfortable with. His kindness helped ease some of the tension in her chest. Ayla sat on the piano bench, took a slow breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. At first, she hesitated, unsure of what to play. She wasn't trained. She didn't know scales or formal lessons, but her heart remembered things her mind didn't. She let her fingers move, soft at first, then firmer, creating a melody that seemed to flow effortlessly. The principal watched silently, amazed by her natural talent. Her hands glided across the keys with a rhythm that didn't belong to a beginner. She didn't look scared now. She looked peaceful, focused, almost glowing. The music filled the room with a gentle warmth that made the principal smile. When she finished, the principal clapped softly and told her she had something rare. Something that couldn't be taught, something that came from deep inside. Ayla felt her chest tighten with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever valued her gift. Over the next days, Ayla practiced during every break, every free period, sometimes even after school. The more she played, the more she understood herself. She could feel the progress in her hands, the growing courage in her heart. The music room became her safe place, a place where she wasn't afraid, a place where her voice finally existed. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the students continued to notice the change in Ayla. She no longer walked like she wanted to disappear. She walked like someone who carried a small, quiet purpose. When she passed by groups of kids, they didn't whisper about her anymore. They asked questions. They told her they were excited to see her perform. They treated her like someone who mattered. But there was one person who struggled to accept this shift. Mrs. Corbin. She watched the class grow more connected to Ella. She watched the principal praise her. She watched the other teachers talk about the upcoming performance. And each moment tightened something in her chest. She felt like she was losing control, losing respect, losing the authority she once held so easily. One afternoon, she called Ailey to her desk. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She told Ailey not to let the praise get to her head. That one good performance didn't make her special. Ayla listened quietly, the old fear tugging at her heart. But something inside her stood stronger this time. She didn't argue, she didn't challenge. She simply nodded politely and walked away, but the words no longer had the power to break her. Her music had already rebuilt parts of her that the teacher could no longer reach. As the week of the performance drew closer, Ayla's small flame of hope grew brighter. Every note she played during practice strengthened it, every smile from her classmates fed it. Every encouraging word from the principal protected it. She was becoming someone new, someone she had never allowed herself to be. Someone who wasn't defined by fear or silence. Someone who wasn't invisible, and she didn't realize it yet. But she was only one step away from a moment that would change her life forever. A moment where the entire school would witness the girl they once ignored rise into the light. The day of the performance arrived faster than Ayla expected. And as she walked toward the school auditorium, her small hands clutched together tightly. The hallways were full of rushing students, parents, and teachers preparing for the event. But Ayla felt like everything around her was moving in slow motion. Her heart pounded in her chest, heavy and loud. But the warmth she had been building for days was still there, glowing quietly inside her. The large auditorium was brighter than any room she had seen before. Dozens of chairs were lined up, and the stage lights shone down on the polished piano waiting at the center. Ayla's breath caught in her throat for a moment. She had practiced many times, but she had never stood in front of a crowd like this. The other students rushed around excitedly. But when they saw Ayla enter, many smiled at her, encouraging her, telling her she would do great. Ayla didn't know how to respond, except with a shy nod. Their kindness felt strange and new, but also comforting. She was no longer the invisible girl in the back corner. She was someone people noticed now. The principal spotted her from across the room and came over with a warm smile. He told her that everyone was excited to hear her play. He said she didn't need to worry about perfection, only to play from the heart. Those words eased her nerves a little, enough to help her breathe again. But standing behind the principal was Mrs. Corbin. Her expression stiff and unreadable. She gave Ayla a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was clear she wasn't pleased about this moment. The teacher said she hoped Ayla would handle the pressure, but the tone carried a sharp edge. Ayla felt a flicker of the old fear inside her. But it didn't take over this time. The flame inside her stayed steady, reminding her of everything she had earned over the past days. The showcase began with a few vocal performances. Then a group of violin students. The audience clapped politely after each act. Ayla watched from the backstage curtains, waiting for her turn. The closer her name came up, the harder her heart pounded, her hands trembled again. Memories of the first day at the classroom piano flashing through her mind. The fear, the whispers, the humiliation she thought would destroy her. But then she remembered the moment her music had silenced everyone. She remembered the warmth in the principal's eyes, the admiration from her classmates, the feelings of peace she found in the music room. And slowly, her breathing steadied, finally. The announcer called her name, Ayla Winters. A soft murmur spread through the room. Many parents and teachers curious to see the girl who had surprised the entire school. Ayla stepped onto the stage with small, careful steps. The lights were bright, almost blinding. But she focused on the piano waiting for her. It was the same shine, the same warmth. the same friend she had discovered inside herself. She sat down, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the world fall away. When she opened them again, she placed her fingers gently on the keys. The room fell silent. Every breath, every whisper, every movement stopped. Then she played. The first notes floated through the auditorium like soft raindrops. Delicate, pure. Then the melody grew stronger, richer. Each note carrying the emotion she had kept hidden for years. Her fingers moved with grace that didn't belong to someone untrained. They moved like someone who had carried music inside her since the day she was born. The audience stared in stunned silence. Parents leaned forward. Teachers exchanged amazed glances. Students who used to tease her watched with admiration. No one had expected the quiet girl to fill the entire hall with such beautiful sound. Even Mrs. Corbin, standing near the door, froze where she was. Her chest tightened as she realized that the moment she meant to use against Ayla had become the moment that revealed her own failure as a teacher. She looked around, seeing how every pair of eyes had shifted away from her and toward the girl she once ignored. Ayla continued playing, letting the music rise higher, letting every emotion inside her flow from her heart into her fingers. It was joy, fear, pain, and courage all woven into a melody that wrapped around the room like warm light. When she finished, her last note hung in the air before fading gently into silence. For just a second, the entire room remained still. Then the applause erupted, loud, powerful, overwhelming. People stood up, clapping, cheering. Calling her name, Ayla blinked, stunned, unable to believe the sound was for her. It was louder than anything she had ever heard. Louder than every cruel whisper she had endured. Louder than every doubt she had carried. She stood up slowly and bowed. Her heart trembling with joy. She had done it. She had played not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but to free the voice she had kept locked inside for so long. As she walked off the stage, the principal met her with proud eyes. Students rushed to congratulate her, even those who had never spoken to her before. And in the very back of the room, Mrs. Corbin stood silently, humbled, unable to deny the truth anymore. The little girl she once tried to humiliate had risen far beyond her expectations. Ayla walked out of the auditorium with light steps. Her heart glowing, she knew her life had changed. She knew she would never be invisible again. But more importantly, she knew something she had never known before. She mattered, and her music had finally told the world.